Sonic games have appeared on multiple consoles for decades now. PlayStation, Xbox, and of course Nintendo consoles all receive new Sonic releases to this day. However, ever since the Nintendo Switch hit shelves in 2017, the Sonic games released for the console often have major differences compared to the versions released on other consoles. Some of these changes are very subtle and hardly hinder the experience, if at all, while others can send you to the hospital. It's safe to say that Sonic's history on Nintendo Switch has been a bit of a rough journey. So let's take a look through all of the Nintendo Switch Sonic ports to see how they stack up against the competition. The first Sonic port released for Nintendo Switch was Sonic Mania. Now, given that this game could run on a fucking 3DS with no issue, then the Switch should also have no issues running this game. And yeah, I have no complaints. Of course, the resolution is slightly lower compared to how it is on PC, but the game still runs at a stable 60 FPS. I had no issues at all with performance. Really, the only downside here is the slightly, and I mean slightly lower graphical fidelity. But given that the Switch allows you to play the game portably at a fair price, yeah, I would say playing this game on Switch is the way to go. There's practically no downside at all. We're off to a good start here, let's hope this can keep up. A few months later, we got Sonic Forces, so this is where the more major differences start. Since Forces is a mainline 3D Sonic game rather than a simple 2D sprite-based game, then yes, the performance is worse on Switch. For one, the resolution took a massive hit. The depth of field is much more present in the Switch version of the game, as rendering a lot of stuff in the background would hinder performance even more. The resolution is also locked to 720p on the Switch, even in docked mode, and the texture resolution is also lower, so yeah, graphically, the Switch version looks a lot worse. On top of that, the game is also locked to 30 FPS compared to the other versions having 60 FPS. And, you know, say what you will about the frame rate difference, but personally, for a game that requires strict inputs due to reaction time and speed-based gameplay, it should at least be 60 FPS. With that being said, Forces is more than playable at 30 FPS. Yeah, this game is not reaction-based whatsoever, so the frame rate will never screw you over here. It is still a slight inconvenience because 60 FPS just feels smoother, but the game is perfectly fine at 30 FPS. I think I should also mention how I found the load times to be slightly longer, but you know, that's kinda to be expected here. So is the Switch version of Forces good? I would say so. It's more than playable in the state it's in on Switch, so if you like playing your game portably, I would say the graphical changes are a good trade-off. I wouldn't choose to play this version of the game over the other versions that I own, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because I'm not playing Forces anyway. Moving on. Team Sonic Racing. I low-key almost forgot to put this game in the video. This game is just... I don't even know, man. It's just kind of there. I only played this game a couple of times on PlayStation and only once on PC for a video, so I don't know what this game is all about. With that being said, the Switch version is fine enough. It suffers from a lot of the same issues that Forces did. The resolution is lower than how it is on PS4 and PC, but instead of 720p, the game is locked to 900p, which is identical to the Xbox One, which, you know, that's a plus. But this version of the game is also running at 30 FPS, which for a game like this really sucks. I mean, it's a racing game. Playing any racing game at 30 FPS is just very jarring if you ask me. It feels very choppy at times. I heard the frame rate is even worse when playing multiplayer as it sometimes drops to 20 FPS there. Yikes. Listen, if you're fine with the 30 FPS, then more power to you. But just looking back at the footage I got, I just can't see how this would be a viable way to play this game. However, there aren't any bugs or glitches that weigh the game down even more, so this version is just okay. You know, that's kinda surprising. None of these ports so far have major glitches or bugs compared to the other versions of the game. I spoke too soon. Oh god. I think we all know of the absolute horror show that was the Sonic Colors Ultimate Switch port at launch. I'm not going to show any footage of the game because it is quite literally seizure-inducing. But yeah, out of all of the versions of Colors Ultimate, the Switch version was by far the most buggy. We would be here all day if I went over every little thing that the Switch version does differently from the other versions of the game. So let's focus on the more major changes. For one, the game is running at a lower resolution, which is to be expected at this point. However, I also noticed that the colors on the Switch version are a little different, and honestly, at times, they kinda look better, but at other times, the lighting in some of the areas appears to be darker than how it is in other versions of the game. The game is also locked at 30 FPS for some reason. I mean, come on now. This game was originally released on the Wii. It should be more than capable of running at 60 FPS. But since the Wii version also ran at 30 FPS, then it's not anything substantial here. It's just kind of baffling. I also noticed how the load times are so much longer than the other versions, and hell, they're even longer than the original Wii version of the game. How is that even possible? But overall, graphically, even the Wii version just looks better. It doesn't help that the Switch version outright runs at a similar resolution to the Wii game, so top it off with the fact that Colors Ultimate on Switch has significant graphical and frame rate issues, and yeah, this port sucks. Thankfully, a lot of the seizure-inducing stuff was patched out very quickly, but boy, let me tell you, at launch, it was bad. But yeah, at least it's portable, am I right? Next up, we have Sonic Origins, and you know what? I'm pleasantly surprised. Given the buggy nature of the game, I expected the Switch version to be a lot worse than the others, but thankfully, I was wrong. Yes, the Switch version of Origins still shares many of the same issues that the other versions suffer from, like the input delay and the weird physics differences, but yeah, the game is pretty much the same, except for the islands. This is not a huge deal or anything, because this is literally just a fucking menu, but this part of the game looks pretty rough compared to the other versions. It's locked to 30 FPS, I know, big surprise there, but it just looks worse. I don't know how much they could have done to fix this, but you know, it's not anything unplayable. Again, it's just a menu, but other than that, the rest of the game is intact. I would highly recommend picking up this version of Origins if you have a Switch. You know, maybe Sonic Switch ports are getting back on track. Just kidding. What the hell happened with a Sonic Frontier Switch port, man? Listen, pre-release, I'm sure we were all expecting the Switch port of the game to look worse, but god damn, I wasn't expecting it to look this bad. Putting it side by side with the PC version, I would say this game has the most substantial differences out of any of the other Switch ports in this video. Besides maybe Colors Ultimate, but that was an entirely different situation. Everything just looks so deep fried that it's not pleasant to view at all. It doesn't help that Frontiers doesn't have a unique art style to set itself apart from other games, which was the only reason why Forces still looked kinda good on Switch. Here, yeah, this looks like a PS2 tech demo. Even the textures on Sonic just look bad. I mean, hey, the textures everywhere look bad. And oh my god, the foliage is non-existent at times. All we're left with is a flat green ground, and it looks awful. I mean, hey, at least the cyberspace levels still look pretty good, but the open zones look horrendous. But how does the game run? Yep, we're back in 30 FPS purgatory yet again, but this time it drops even lower. And then there's the poppin'. Oh my god. It was already pretty bad on other consoles, but it's even worse here. Good luck trying to get some of those memory tokens, man, because you're going to need it. But yeah, there's not much else to say about the Frontier Switch port, really. Out of all of the ones previously talked about in this video, this one looks the worst in my opinion. But at the end of the day, it's still Sonic Frontiers. It's practically the same experience, just with a huge graphical and performance hit, but it's playable at least. Honestly, I'm surprised they got it running natively on the Switch at all. And finally, we have Sonic Superstars, and this one is kind of weird. I wasn't expecting much from this port, especially considering the history of Sonic Switch ports up until this point. Now, the graphics do take a considerable hit, like a massive hit. Everything here is just lower res, but with the type of game that Superstars is, that isn't a huge deal. I feel like the lower resolution makes the game look like it could have been on the 3DS, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It just gives it a slight bit of more charm, if anything. Surprisingly, the game still maintains 60 FPS, which I was not expecting at all, especially after the whole Colors Ultimate situation. The game would have been just fine at 30 FPS, but you could tell that maintaining 60 FPS was one of their priorities when it came to optimizing the game, because again, the resolution does take a considerable hit. But yeah, I have no complaints with Superstars on the Switch. It's one of the better Switch ports. So those are all of the Sonic Switch ports. It turns out that while a lot of them are pretty good alternatives, others are pretty lacking. The quality in these ports is very inconsistent at the end of the day. So if you're planning on buying a Sonic game for Switch, just know that these issues will be present in the game. As for Sonic X Shadow Generations, I think this game is going to have a really good Switch port. You can tell they're already spending a lot of time polishing the game and optimizing it, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Switch port of Sonic X Shadow Generations ran at 60 FPS. Now, I don't think the Shadow Generations part is going to run at 60 FPS, but for base generations, it's a possibility. But that's all for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all later. Goodbye.